The man who wrote the definitive guide to happiness also spent years being miserable. Ghazali was the most successful scholar of his time. Famous, wealthy, respected by kings and students alike. But inside, he felt completely empty. His crisis led him to discover something revolutionary about human nature. He realized there are three completely different types of happiness, and most people get stuck in the first type their entire lives. They think happiness means getting what you want. But real happiness, he discovered, means becoming who you truly are. The difference is life-changing. Modern research confirms that people who follow his three-stage method report levels of fulfillment that external success can never provide. Have you ever achieved something you worked toward for months, only to feel empty afterward? Maybe you got that promotion, started that relationship, or bought something you had been wanting. But instead of lasting joy, you felt a strange hollowness, as if the achievement meant less than you expected. This is exactly what happened to Ghazali, and it led him to one of the most important discoveries about human happiness ever made. According to recent academic research published on his work, Ghazali identified a fundamental problem with how most people approach happiness. We chase what he called false happiness. We think happiness means acquiring things, achieving status, or getting other people to approve of us. But this approach, he discovered, creates a cycle of constant craving that can never be satisfied. Modern psychology at Harvard and Stanford has now validated what Ghazali taught centuries ago. Research shows that people who base their happiness on external achievements experience what scientists call hedonic adaptation. You get temporary pleasure from success, but your baseline happiness returns to where it was before. This is why people who win the lottery often report being no happier a year later than they were before winning. But Ghazali discovered something that goes beyond this surface-level understanding. He realized that there are actually three distinct stages of human happiness, and most people never move beyond the first stage. Each stage represents a completely different way of experiencing life, and each one builds on the previous stage. The first stage is what he called the happiness of acquisition. This is where most people spend their entire lives. In this stage, you believe happiness comes from getting what you want. A better job, more money, the perfect relationship, social recognition, or material possessions. You think that once you achieve these things, you will finally be happy. Research published in academic studies on Ghazali's work shows that he observed how this approach creates what we now call the hedonic treadmill. You achieve something, feel good briefly, then start wanting the next thing. Your happiness becomes dependent on constantly acquiring new experiences or possessions. But the satisfaction never lasts because you are trying to fill an inner emptiness with external things. Ghazali noticed that people in this stage often feel anxious and restless. They might achieve their goals, but find themselves immediately focused on the next achievement. They compare themselves to others constantly. They feel threatened when others succeed because it makes them feel less successful by comparison. Their self-worth fluctuates based on their circumstances. Modern positive psychology research at places like Harvard confirms exactly what Ghazali observed. Studies show that people who base their happiness primarily on external factors report lower life satisfaction, higher anxiety, and more depression than those who have developed internal sources of well-being. They also tend to have relationships that are more transactional and less fulfilling. But here is what makes Ghazali's insights so valuable. He did not just identify the problem. He discovered that there is a specific path out of this first stage into something much more satisfying. The journey begins with what he called the second stage, which is the happiness of self-knowledge. According to research on his teachings, the second stage begins when you stop looking outside yourself for answers and start looking within. This stage is characterized by what Ghazali called recognizing the nature and character of the self. You begin to understand your own patterns, motivations, fears, and desires at a deeper level. In this stage, you start asking different questions. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" you ask, "Who am I?" Instead of trying to change your circumstances to feel better, you work on understanding why certain circumstances affect you the way they do. You begin to see the difference between your surface thoughts and your deeper wisdom. Modern research on self-awareness supports what Ghazali taught about this stage. Studies show that people with higher levels of self-awareness report greater life satisfaction, better relationships, and more resilience in the face of challenges. They are less reactive to external circumstances and more able to make decisions aligned with their authentic values. But Ghazali observed that self-knowledge alone is not enough. Many people become very aware of their patterns and psychology, but still feel stuck. They know what they should do, but struggle to actually do it. They understand their problems intellectually, but cannot seem to change them emotionally. This is where most personal development and therapy approaches stop. But Ghazali discovered there was a crucial next step. The transition from the second stage to the third stage involves what he called placing the heart as the leader of the self. In modern terms, this means learning to make decisions based on your deeper wisdom rather than just your thoughts or emotions. It means developing what researchers now call emotional intelligence and intuitive decision-making. People in this stage learn to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom within themselves. They develop what Ghazali described as inner guidance. They can feel when something is right for them versus when they are acting from ego, fear, or social pressure. They become less driven by compulsive thinking and more guided by a sense of inner knowing. Research on emotional intelligence shows that people who develop these capacities are more successful in their careers, have better relationships, and report higher levels of life satisfaction. They are better at managing stress, resolving conflicts, and making decisions that align with their long-term well-being rather than just their immediate desires. But according to Ghazali, even this level of development is not the final stage. The third and highest stage involves what he called contemplation, or connection to something greater than your individual self. This does not necessarily mean anything religious or mystical. In modern terms, it means developing a sense of purpose and meaning that extends beyond your personal concerns. People who reach this stage experience what researchers call eudaimonic well-being. This is happiness that comes from living in accordance with your deepest values and contributing to something larger than yourself. It might be your family, your community, your work, creative expression, or simply the experience of being alive and connected to the natural world. Studies on eudaimonic well-being show that people who have this sense of larger purpose are more resilient, healthier, and report deeper levels of life satisfaction than those focused primarily on personal pleasure or achievement. They experience what Ghazali described as a happiness that does not depend on external circumstances. Research published in academic journals on Ghazali's concept shows that his three-stage model has several advantages over other approaches to happiness. First, it does not eliminate natural human desires, but shows you how to relate to them differently. Second, it provides a clear progression that you can follow step by step. Third, it does not teach fatalism, but motivates people to actively pursue their development and well-being. What makes this approach so powerful is that each stage builds on the previous one. You do not have to reject the first stage completely to move to the second. Instead, you learn to hold your desires more lightly. You can still want things and work toward goals, but your happiness no longer depends entirely on whether you achieve them. Similarly, when you move from the second stage to the third, you do not lose your self-awareness. Instead, your sense of self expands beyond just your individual concerns to include a larger sense of connection and purpose. Modern neuroscience research supports Ghazali's observations about these stages. Brain imaging shows that people who have developed contemplative practices and a sense of larger, purpose show different patterns of brain activity. They have better emotional regulation, less reactivity to stress, and more activity in areas associated with compassion and well-being. Studies at Stanford and other universities show that people who practice what researchers call self-transcendent experiences report higher levels of happiness, better immune function, and greater resilience. These findings align perfectly with what Ghazali taught about the third stage of happiness. So how do you actually move through these stages in your daily life? According to research on his teachings, the process begins with honest self-observation. Start paying attention to when you feel happy or unhappy and what circumstances trigger these feelings. Notice when your happiness depends on getting something or avoiding something. For the second stage, develop practices that increase self-awareness. This might include journaling, meditation, therapy, or simply taking time for reflection. The key is learning to observe your thoughts and emotions without immediately acting on them. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts or emotions, but the awareness that observes them. The transition to the third stage involves gradually expanding your focus beyond your immediate personal concerns. This might mean finding ways to contribute to others, connecting with nature, engaging in creative work that expresses something meaningful to you, or simply practicing gratitude for the experience of being alive. What is remarkable about Ghazali's approach is that it does not require you to change your external circumstances dramatically. The transformation happens in how you relate to whatever circumstances you find yourself in. You can be in the same job, the same relationships, the same living situation, but experience them completely differently. Research shows that people who follow this type of progression report not just higher levels of happiness, but also improvements in their relationships, their work performance, and their physical health. They become more present, more creative, more compassionate, and more resilient. The beauty of Ghazali's three-stage method is that it gives you a clear path forward, no matter where you currently are. If you recognize that you have been stuck in the first stage, chasing external validation and acquisition, you now know that there are other possibilities. If you have developed some self-awareness, but still feel stuck, you understand that the next step is learning to trust your deeper wisdom. And if you have developed both self-knowledge and inner guidance, you can explore what it means to connect your life to purposes and meanings larger than your individual concerns. Each stage offers its own rewards and prepares you for the next level of development. Modern research confirms that happiness is not just a feeling, but a skill that can be developed. Like any skill, it requires understanding, practice, and patience with yourself as you learn. Ghazali's three-stage method provides a roadmap that has been tested not just by centuries of human experience, but also by contemporary scientific research. The next time you find yourself feeling empty after achieving something you wanted, remember Ghazali's insight. The emptiness is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are ready to explore deeper levels of happiness than external acquisition can provide. Your dissatisfaction with surface-level achievements is actually the beginning of wisdom. True happiness, as Ghazali discovered through his own crisis and transformation, is not something you get. It is something you become. And the journey of becoming is available to anyone willing to look honestly at themselves and take the steps toward a more authentic and fulfilling way of being alive.